Yeah, if I could have whistled, I would have whistled at you, and not because you're just stellarly good looking, but there is that too. So here's what I've done. Obviously, we got way into the weeds last week, and I still had a whole nother week's worth of material for introduction. And while I still think that's valuable, it's not as valuable as getting into Romans. And so what I'm going to try to do is in 2 slides cover what would have taken us another hour to do. And so let's just kind of do that and kind of get started here. But let's start with at least what we talked about, so we're all sort of on the same page here. The first thing we talked about was righteousness. We sort of came up with a definition of it. And we had this idea of the righteousness of man, or the righteousness of the law. That was the standard, the Torah. That's how you evaluated whether you were righteous or not. And for Paul, he said, I have obeyed the law. I would be considered lost. I wouldn't be considered righteous. The law is the standard, and obedience is the method. That's how you obtain righteousness. But something happened on the road to Damascus, and he was able to see again, not just in a physical way, but in a spiritual way. And then he has this understanding of righteousness, the righteousness of God, that it's from God. It's not from us at all. It's credited to us through faith. That's how that righteousness is obtained. And when he talks about the righteousness in Romans, and he talks about faith in Romans, it's this idea. It's what he was able to see again on the road to Damascus, why we spent so much time there. Next, we looked at the gospel, and we kind of hit it a little bit, that both Peter and Paul, preaching from two different perspectives, both preached to Gentiles and both used the gospel, death, burial, resurrection, and appearance. And faith is justification by faith. That was the signature point of their gospel, that is how you obtain this righteousness of God. They were in agreement. Different backgrounds. You got a fisherman, you got a Pharisee. Paul specifically going to the Gentiles, and Peter, for the most part, ministers to Jews. But they have the same gospel. It's the same message. It's the same understanding. It's the same acknowledgement of who Jesus is and what Jesus did. And so because these are the two pillars, because they agree, of course, everything is smooth in the church, right? Well, not exactly. We talked about the Jews being dispersed throughout the Roman Empire, and how the things that happened in the Roman Empire allowed that movement of the gospel, movement of communication, movement of goods and services, movement of people. It just allowed this flexibility. When Paul could write a letter to a church and that gets passed around, it's because of all the improvements that the Roman Empire allowed that to happen. And when Paul goes, he goes to a synagogue, and both Jews and Gentiles believe. So he's preaching, usually starting in the city at the synagogue, and both Jews and Gentiles are reached by the gospel. We talked about persecution, and the Jews have this thing about we talked about heresy. That's the reason Paul was on the road to Damascus, is to stamp out this heresy. But then he comes to faith. And you know what? All of those things that he felt as a Jew about the Gentiles and about uncleanliness and about the Samaritans and about you have to go around, all of those things magically disappear, right? No, those things are still there. Even though you're a Jew and you come to faith, you still have this tradition. You still have this law. You still have this way of living. You still have this culture. You have this understanding of God. That doesn't just magically go away. And so when Jews and Gentiles get together, there is this sort of us and them mentality. We saw that with Peter at Cornelius, when he says, I really shouldn't be in your house because you're not worthy, but God told me to. And Cornelius said, I don't care who you are. God told you to do it. That's why you're here. And then Cornelius' family come to faith. And so Peter sees firsthand that the same spirit that's poured out on the Jews is also poured on the Gentiles. But he still has this baggage. We all have that baggage when we come to faith. And it's interesting that within the body, that baggage is still there. Jews accept their Messiah through faith. They receive the Spirit. And the Jews were astonished. That was the word in Cornelius's house. The Jews that were with him were astonished that the Gentiles through faith could receive the Spirit, because they're them and we're us. How can them have what us have? So that attitude is still within the body. We didn't read all of Acts 15, although I had planned to, because there's so much good stuff there. But Peter and Paul are convinced, and they're on the same side, that Gentiles do not need to be converted to Judaism. That's not necessary. But the traditional Jews, wait a minute, God gave us the law. God gave us circumcision. He commanded these things. So they must do that. Gentiles must do that. And so what happened at the Council of Jerusalem was a conciliatory decision to bridge that gap. And they bridged that gap for the purpose of unity. Yes, there's different points of view here. There's different traditions. There's different understanding of cleanliness and of what to eat and how to prepare food and all of these different things. And what that council did was to try to bridge that gap between these differences. But disunity continues. And so sometime after that Council of Jerusalem, Paul writes Galatians, and he's rather fiery when he writes Galatians, and he specifically calls out Peter for his duplicity. He says, why do you, as a Jew, live like a Gentile, but then want Gentiles to have to accept all of these Jewish traditions? That's duplicitous. This is not how it's supposed to be. And of course, Paul continues to be challenged in his ministry within the body and without. He's persecuted from the Jews that are still trying to stamp out heresy. And there's disruption because there's Jews within the body that still hold on to these traditions, the law, these things that have to be there, the us versus them attitude. Okay, now let's actually get into where Rome is, because is that an okay summary? That saved you about an hour's worth of reading right there in 5 minutes. That's what I should have done last week, but I did not. So I said, we've taken this journey through Acts. No, I've summarized this journey through Acts to remind us of some of the background context. But what about Rome? Why is Paul writing to them? Well, here's the first thing. This wasn't a church that Paul established. And in fact, it's not a letter like his other letters where he's encouraging or challenging or correcting or teaching. It's different than that. He's not responding to a church that he's created or to an individual that he's trying to. There was no issue. It's different in that way. But a church was there, and Paul writes to it. So how was it established, and why is Paul writing to them? So that's the question we're going to try to answer. Well, the Catholics have a tradition that Peter actually was in Rome. Peter. Okay. It's Catholic tradition from 37 to 42, and that's how the church got started. Because the church is built on the rock, on Peter, and so Peter has to be at the very forefront to support the Catholic hierarchy. So, but there's really no evidence of that, but that is the tradition. But if you go back to Pentecost, this is Acts 2. You go back to Pentecost and you look at all the people that are there for Pentecost. You see that there's visitors from Rome, and so the thought was these people heard the gospel. They responded to Peter's sermon. They took the church back. They took the message back, and that church was growing. And think about what Rome is as a metropolitan city: multi-ethnic, multicultural, Jews and Gentiles, rich and poor, slave and free, male and female, and all of the variants that are there in a culture that's that way. And yet a church forms, and they all have to get along. And because you're in that multicultural, multiracial, multi-view environment, you just figure out how to get along with people because, oh, you're different than me. Well, I'm different than you. We all get along. So it doesn't seem to be the same kind of thing that you would get in Judea, where the us and them, the Jews versus the Gentiles. But something happens. All this stuff I've saved you from reading. You should be very thankful. So we have this idea that Claudius was the emperor, and he is so tired of the turmoil between Jew and Gentile that Christus is creating all these arguments about Christus, Jesus the Christ, that he orders all the Jews to leave Rome. So they do, and we have this little passage in Acts 18 where Aquila and Priscilla are part of that group of Jews that were in Rome, and then they were asked to leave. Paul, of course, meets up with them, and Paul ministers with them. And if you read the end of Acts, there's a greeting back to Aquila and Priscilla that the Roman church is now meeting in their house in Rome. They move back to Rome because Nero defeats or kills Claudius, and he comes to power. So there's a 5-year gap where the Jews are removed. The church is still there. The church is still continuing. But think about it. If you take all of your traditional Jewish, their culture, their ways, and you remove them, what happens to the body that's left? It probably leans a little bit more Gentile. It probably leads more to that point of view. But now they come back. And so now the church that was all together and all worshiping together now is actually shifted. It's changed. You come back and you're the traditionalist. Has it shifted too much? Will there now be conflict? I think Paul thinks so. And I think, well, that's one of the themes that he writes about, because unity is a huge theme in Romans. And he also talks a lot about the Jew and Gentiles. If you look at your questions, by the way, in here, and you look starting at question 5, how does the gospel address our universal condition? He's setting a platform, a level platform. How does the gospel reveal a single means of salvation? Again, a level platform, Jew, Gentile, free, slave, male, female, the whole thing. It's a level platform. 7, how does a common ancestry and condition unify the body? He's answering these questions within the body of Romans. And I think as you go through, you can read the rest of those, that he's trying to form a factual basis for why we have this unity. And then when you get to the application in chapters 12 through 16, you have the working out. How does that unity really work out in a practical way in real life? And so I think understanding some of this context of the book, I think helps us to understand how this letter came to be written. I think Paul thinks there may be conflict, or maybe there still is conflict, and he wants to address that, but he wants to address it in a way that isn't just stop doing that. He wants to address it in a way, no, this is what God has done. And he's done it for you and 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 you. This is what God's done. It's a universal thing that God's doing here. It's the same method. It's the same means. It's the same gift that God is giving. This is God's work. And so all of these little differences that we have should kind of fade away. They should kind of fade away, because if we focus on what God has done, those differences go away. And I think we actually can achieve unity. That's why I thought it was really important to have some of this background context. One or two of you may agree. Now that it's summarized, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Okay, well, next time I do this, it'll be a week shorter. But I appreciate you indulging me in my...
I didn't realize that they were here for the time that it came back.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so that was Claudius, and I think it's 49 to 54. And the Roman persecution really didn't start till Nero burned Rome down in 64. And that's when Roman persecution really fired up. They were involved because the Jews and the Gentiles would create disturbances, and Rome does not like disturbance. Time for your input. Where does the church currently have that same kind of internal conflict that we would have read about if we had time? Do you see that within the church, within the body now, that we have conflict?
In this particular church or in like?
Church, big church, church universal.
I see Catholics as being more on the Jewish wavelength.
Uh-huh.
With all the rules and stuff, and not wanting to let people worship in their areas. Tradition.
Yeah, that very much so. It's not just Catholics, but if you think about, there are some worship services that are very liturgical, Episcopalian, Anglican, Lutheran, Catholic, Orthodox, we go to the Greek Orthodox Church. It's the pageantry. That's what's displayed. And you come here, there's not really a lot of pageantry here.
Denominations versus autonomous church bodies.
Right.
Which is how we interpret church structure.
Right. We're autonomous. We have our own elders. We have our own leadership here. Other churches, they report to a hierarchy. And that's not bad necessarily, because it gets some consistency and some other types of things. But these are conflicts.
And as we move forward, we have a lot of progressive church entering the mix.
Right. So now you have liberal theology. Let's leave it there. Not political, but liberal, more liberal theology than conservative theology. How about the term full gospel? I can't think of a particular denomination, Assemblies of God, where it's very much experiential with the Spirit, and versus other churches where it's preaching. It's preaching the word, it's study. No, it's charismatic. It's experiencing the Spirit. We all have the Spirit, but that becomes an elevated piece of the worship. So there are still these conflicts that are there.
Racial conflict.
Excellent. How many of you have gone to
churches?
Yeah.
I tell you, they're awesome. I love the worship.
Yeah.
I don't care what it's called. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
But they're primarily Black people.
Right.
Because there's a cultural association there. I don't know that it's because of segregation, but they have traditions and culture that are common to them.
Right.
And they enjoy worshiping together. I enjoy worshiping with them.
Yeah.
I really do.
They say Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week because of just how there's a racial divide there. You have churches that are all Korean based, mainly because of language.
Yeah, again,
or Chinese for that reason as well. Heaven is not going to be like that, though. Heaven is going to be rainbow. It's going to be everybody. And we ought to, practice that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I thought it was just Lutheran.
Not just Lutheran.
Maybe in your wing.
Maybe in your wing. Yeah. On your floor of the mansion. So how do you deal with these? And some of these are they're different, different style or different. But some of them really are spiritual. They're theological. They're understanding of who God is, or who, how we're saved. Some of those differences are really profound. A lot of churches are very legalistic. In order to be saved, you do X, Y, Z. Those churches say you have to be baptized to be saved. Other churches know that it's a sacrament. It's
tradition.
Symbolism, of what's happened.
In the South, you got major division between, I was a part of Church of Christ, the frozen, chosen, or whatever, but then you got the Baptists and then the Charismatics, but primarily the Calvinists versus the others.
That's a whole other.
Well, and we'll hit some of that later.
Huge division.
Yeah, it is a division.
Feel it. But I think the point you're getting to, I'll hold off on. I'll let you get there.
But here's the point I'm getting at is, does our focus or can our focus on the first importance of the gospel, as what Paul says, help us diffuse those tensions, because they do exist? And how does it? And I'll leave that up. How does our focus on the gospel diffuse some of those differences?
Yes.
I think, having been raised Catholic and coming from a family with many Catholics, and I think it goes along with what Jeff said today, we have to be leaders, gentle leaders, but my favorite is when my mom was in the nursing home at about 94 years old, looking at Dad and said to me, Marta, do you think I've been good enough?
Yeah.
And that's when we jump in and the gospel.
Yeah, the answer to that is no, you haven't. However, Jesus has. He has been good enough. And if you go back to the gospel, there it is. There's your answer to that. Yeah.
And that's our focus.
Yeah.
For me, extending that right hand of fellowship to Calvinists is a matter of decision and choice.
Right.
And throwing off tradition. And what was ground into me as a youngster,
Yeah.
you know, like, I mean, even having musical instruments was forbidden. And like, come on, man, dude. Learned to let that go.
Yeah.
Because of the three things. The first importance, I will extend the right hand of
Yeah.
fellowship with my Calvinist brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
I disagree with them and I will never teach those things, but I
Yeah.
don't consider them the first important.
Right. That's not the first important. And that becomes the leveler. And I think as we read Romans, we're going to see this. Paul is going to bring it down to this basic thing. That's why there's a universal method of salvation. There's a universal condition that we all are under. We have a common ancestry through faith and a common condition through Adam. And that's what unifies us. That's what brings unity. Yes, we see through a glass dimly and we don't understand all of Scripture. We never will. But if we focus on the important things, that gets us through. All right, I'm going to skip this next question for time, but I'll let you think about it. How can we as a body and as an individual believer be more Christ-like with this kind of conflict? I think you mentioned one of those things of just extending the right hand of fellowship and not ignoring maybe, but
I just look at the woman at the well. Enough said.
yeah. Okay, so let's now actually open up Romans. Let's get there. And we're gonna try to hit our second question here, which is, how does Paul address the church at Rome? So he's going to open this letter up. We've already read the first 6 verses where he's introducing himself and what he hopes to convey to them, and now he's going to actually address the church. And so here we go, and I'll start with my favorite student, Nancy.
To all in Rome who are loved by God and called to be his holy people. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so Paul addresses the letter to all Jews, Gentiles, men, women, slave, free, masters, servants. It's to all. It's to all. So he starts off, and immediately it's an inclusive thing. It's a unity thing. He's not picking out only the ones that agree with him. He's not picking out only the ones that follow this particular path or that understand God this way. No, it's to all. What is the unifying thing? What does he say that keeps them all unified? There it is. Yeah, there it is. And we'll spend a lot of time on calling, because this word is repeated all throughout. And hopefully by the end of this, you will be able to give me a definition. If I ask you, what does it mean to be called? And you'll say, the way I understand Scripture, this way, knowing that there are other people that might have a very different point of view of what that calling is. But here's let's see if I want to ask this question now. I think I do. Note what they're called to. It's not just a calling, it's a call to something. And so I'll ask this question. If someone asked you if your faith journey is a calling, how would you answer? How would you answer that question?
I would hope it is. I
Okay,
would just be doing it in my own power.
all right. So it's not something I've accomplished. It's something God's accomplished through me or something along those words.
Prompting me
I had to choose to respond to it. I resisted, like Paul kicking the goats, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to kick the goats. You have to make a choice.
Yeah. Anybody feel like they're, go
At
ahead.
least in this context, we're not being called to a job or a function.
Right.
I mean, my translation says saints, this one holy
Right,
people.
right,
That's what he's calling us to be.
right. Yeah. Yeah. We're called to be the righteousness of God. That's what we're going to be called to. And he'll be a little more explicit about that but to be this holy people, this people that exhibit that righteousness, that even that God has. And we talked about what God's righteousness is, his character. Well, it's not just, judgment and mercy, but I was going to have Marla do the thing here, but it's loving kindness and gentleness. It's the fruit of the Spirit. It's the things that come out of us that reflect God's character.
They
So,
were called to be descendants of Abraham. And what did Abraham do? He picked up and went someplace he'd never been,
He
just because God said so.
from faith.
chose
Yeah.
to agree.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
there, it says called to belong to Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
right before verse 7.
Yeah.
There's a call to belonging to Jesus.
As authority is one of the themes that come through there. It's that belonging is also the authority. Okay, next little. Can you, Craig, if you can read that from there, okay to read?
First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world. God, whom I serve in the Spirit and preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you.
He's setting the tone for how he's going to speak to this group of people that are going to read this letter. What are some ways that Paul encourages their own calling, which he just mentioned before, with the words that in this little couple sentences here? Can you find 3 or 4 things maybe that Paul is doing that's encouraging them?
Well, he tells them that their faith is being reported around the world.
Right. So he's acknowledging their faith and that it's news. Okay, that's a good one. How else is he encouraging them?
He's constantly remembering you.
Right. Right. He's remembering, he's praying for them.
He desires to visit them, to be with them.
Right. Right. He wants to visit with them, to share in their fellowship. Yeah. So just from the very beginning, Paul is setting a very warm tone, I want to be a part of you. I want you to be a part of me. Second question I had is we're not Paul. But how can we encourage our fellow believers in this same way? And you can say, well, the same things. Is that what we do? Do we do it the same way? Are we thankful? Do we pray for them? Do we encourage them? Do we acknowledge their growth and their faith?
We're probably more inclined to point out where we think they've gone wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we are, aren't we?
His companion, Barnabas, what son of encouragement.
Yeah,
That's a gift.
that's a
I
gift.
think Paul's working on it here.
He's working on it.
Because the witness that they have had all over the world, that's an amazing encouragement.
Yeah, that what you're doing is important. What you're doing makes a difference. What you're doing is recognized. I think we all would want to hear that about our walk. You know,
You think back to the Great Commission, it's being completed.
Mhm.
So already at this time, the message has been spread throughout the known world.
right. It's already gone out.
It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. We just did that question. All right. Next.
I long to see you that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles.
So it continues this introduction, these opening comments to this particular church. And when I first read this, I thought, oh, I'm going to impart some spiritual gift to make you strong.
Mhm.
Like, I'm Paul, I have something to give you. And I thought, well, that's just, Paul's thinks a little too much of himself. But then look at the next phrase. That is, that I may be mutually encouraged. It's a give and take. And this is one of his themes about, I think, how the body works together. It's not one person who is dishing out gifts for each of us. It's all of us together doing what we do, mutually encouraging each other. Yeah, he expects them to minister to him in return. That's how a body works. That's how it grows.
Should work.
Yeah.
You get the cult of personality.
Yeah.
Which does happen. You have to deal with it in Corinthians.
Yeah. Well, Paul may be the famous one or the known one or the upfront one, but he's not the only one. And he recognizes he's not the only one, that all the parts have to work together. He writes that in other letters as well. I got to thinking about Anchor. Do we expect Jeff, Robert, and Jonah to feed us? Yeah, that's their role as ministers. That's an expectation. I expect Jeff to preach every Sunday, or one of them to preach every Sunday. I expect to hear the word and explanation. I expect him to encourage our own walk as he interprets scripture for us, or as he reads scripture for us. That's an expectation. But the follow-up question is, what do we offer them for their faith? I don't know how many sermons Jeff has preached where service is a big piece of it. And Jeff, that's what Jeff is. He's a servant. And that whole idea of service is so important. So when he says, I have a need for Jamaica relief, and people step forward, they serve in that way, checkbook or whatever, that encourages them because he sees our faithfulness, our service, and that's what's so key to him. And the same with Robert and Jonah and their ministries. When we have talent that surrounds them, and we have people that volunteer to do that, when he sees the congregation and we're all singing in our own way, I think that's an encouragement, because what Robert then is doing, feeding us the songs that he has curated for us, and hear us singing them back with some excitement, I think that's a real encouragement to him, because that means his ministry is effective. That means he's doing something well. Or Robert also leads the small groups. And so there is this idea of mutuality within the body. Yeah, we have leaders. We have people, that have responsibilities. But a body works because it all works together. It's mutually.
I think also it's good for us to have a conversation with them and share vocally that what they've said or the music has really touched them,
Right.
so that encourages them.
Right.
Also.
Right. October was Pastor Appreciation Month, and I know a lot of people did cards and words of that. But why is it October? Why isn't that, you know,
I
whenever?
give mine in November because I'm more thankful to you.
Well,
Because he has a birthday in November.
that's always true.
I should have thought that Robert's was last week too, but maybe I'm just like somebody that wants to be different, but I want them to know that I'm thankful for them.
Yeah.
I appreciate them, but
Yeah.
everybody else got to appreciate them. So I want to be different. Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, and that's how Paul said, I am thankful for you. And then the mutuality, and we're thankful for them.
I think that encourages them.
It does. It does. And it takes so little. It takes so little for us to do that. All right, I'm going to continue here because I want to get done before the pie's gone.
I am obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome.
Yeah, so Greeks and non-Greeks, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. But wise and foolish? Is this like a Proverbs understanding of the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and if you don't fear the Lord, you're foolish? Is that what he's talking about? I struggle with that, so I read some commentaries. And the commentary suggested that it's really a class view. You know, the Greeks thought they were intellectually superior. You know, the knowledge was you know, all important, and not everybody feels that way, so they're foolish because they don't think that way.
It's their perspective.
Right. It's us versus them. It's this attitude of Greeks and non-Greeks, wise and foolish. These arbitrary divisions that we have, that we separate ourselves, you know, male and female, rich, poor, whatever gamut you want to do, we separate ourselves. We have these divisions. We have these prejudices. And Paul says, no. I'm preaching the gospel to all. The prejudices aren't going to matter because we are united in our condition, in our salvation, in our ancestry. And as we read the rest of Romans, you'll see how Paul pulls this out over and over again. These distinctions that we have are immaterial. They're unimportant.
That's just that idea. I'd say slave versus free.
Slave and free is a big one.
Really.
Right.
There's a book, Foolishness to the Greeks, and it talks about this concept. I mean, it addresses what Paul may be addressing, that he's dealt with Greek philosophers.
Yeah.
And how foolish it must seem to them that the man dying on the cross.
Right.
God come down as a man died, he died on the cross, and then he was raised. What kind of nonsense are you talking about?
It's foolishness to the Gentiles.
It's foolishness. That's a quote. Yeah.
Stumbling block to Jews.
Yeah. That's all right. Here's something I thought about. Where does Paul's obligation originate? He says, I'm obligated both to Jews, to Greeks and non-Greeks. Where's his obligation come from?
He was called to be the evangelist to the Gentiles specifically.
Yeah.
Said that was his specific calling. He said so.
Yeah, right
He
there.
was set apart.
Right, he's set apart for that purpose. Yeah. Paul takes it seriously. He says, that's my purpose. That's my mission. That's why I was chosen. That's why I was set apart. We call it volunteer work. Paul calls it an obligation. And I thought, maybe I need to rethink something here. I think when Paul says, as he describes it, I'm obligated, I think it says something about who's in charge. Yeah, I volunteer. I'm in charge of my own time. And I decide I want to do this, that, or the other. I volunteer. Look at me. Aren't I special? No. Paul says, no, this isn't volunteer work. I am obligated because of how I'm called. We asked this question earlier about, is our calling like Paul's? Well, not to preach to the Gentiles, perhaps, but there is this idea of calling. And if we are called, do we have a sense of obligation to that calling, for whatever that calling is? If it's to be generous, are we obligated to be generous? I don't know. Answer the question. I think so. If that's our calling, that's our obligation. The same attitude that Paul has for his calling and his mission and his purpose. I think if we put Christ in charge, then yes, it's our obligation too, for how we're called, how we're set apart, what our mission is. But I think he's setting the groundwork for his arguments about calling and about authority and about sacrifice when we get to 12:1. As we offer our bodies as a living sacrifice.
It correlates this to the Great Commission.
Yeah, they're obligated to go and preach, and they did, in spite.
They didn't know what he was saying, but now
Well,
sort of we're starting to get it here.
we're working on it. Yeah.
It's interesting, he's obligated to both Gentiles and non-Gentiles.
Right.
Yeah.
Greeks and non-Greeks. So even though his primary mission may be to the Gentiles, it's like he's trying to dispel this notion that there's a difference
Right.
in God's eyes.
Exactly. All of these distinctions we make, and we all make them, there is no distinction. In fact, and one of the things we would have read, if I could have spent another 3 weeks in the introduction, was both Paul and Peter say there is now no distinction, because when the gospel is preached and they responded, Jew or Gentile, the Spirit was made evident.
Call nothing unclean that I've made clean.
Yeah, for the Cornelius. Yeah. Okay. And then it goes on.
For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith.
For I am not ashamed of the gospel. Yeah, I think we don't doubt Paul's boldness or his determination, the fierceness for which he fights for the cause of Christ. But I think he gives a little hint as he's doing this introduction to the people for this letter. I think he's giving a little hint about what he's going to talk about. Here's the first part. We've already talked about this. He's going to talk about the gospel, death, burial, resurrection, appearance. It's the power of God. This is God at work. This isn't us achieving some victory or obtaining our own righteousness. No, this is God at work. He brings salvation. And notice how universal it is. It's not to the frozen chosen. It's to everyone who believes. So he has this theme of the gospel is the unifying principle of the church. It's the unifying principle of a life of faith. And it's the power of God to bring about that change in us. The other thing that he kind of introduces is this idea of revelation. God's spoken. He's made himself known, and his word continues to speak. And in the gospel, the simple truth that God's revealed something amazing. Our seeking for that glory of being present with God, and for which we find ourselves woefully inadequate, that glory is obtainable. And it's obtainable through faith. And it's obtainable because of God's grace. And it's obtainable because we believe that what the gospel represents, what the gospel does, is give us a pathway to that faith. It's not a new concept, Paul's going to argue. No, it's always been this way. Like you brought up Abraham earlier. It's with Moses. It's with the law itself. The gospel will reveal the power of God, the attainable glory of God that's only found through faith, as it has always been. and not only glory, but true righteousness, the very righteousness of God, not our own. We talked about that a little bit last week. And then here's the other thing here. This is the quote here is Habakkuk 2:4. And Paul will, I mentioned this the first week, Paul will pull in these Old Testament quotes, and it's a nice turn of phrase. It perfectly fits in this paragraph. That's not why he's using it. What he's doing is he's pulling the whole context of Habakkuk forward. The old made new, as Jeff would say. And if you remember Habakkuk, it's a series of dialogues. He first asks, why are you letting this unrighteousness in Judah continue? Why aren't you doing something about this, God? And God says, I will. Something amazing is about to happen. And when he reveals that what's amazing is that the Babylonians will come and wipe out the southern kingdom, he says, why are you using the unrighteous to judge the righteous? Why are you using the unrighteous, Babylon, to judge the unrighteous? And then God responds that at the appointed time, a revelation we made that will silence the arrogant voices. The Lord is in his temple, and let the earth be silent before him. God will reveal something. And what he's going to reveal is so amazing, is that he is going to make us right. He is going to make us righteous. The power of the gospel will do that. And it'll do that through faith. And that's the conclusion Habakkuk reaches at the end of those dialogues. And so that's why Paul can pull that forward and say, this is it. This is what Habakkuk was referring to when Habakkuk says the righteous will live by faith. When he concludes that after these dialogues, and they will live by faith because that is the power of the gospel itself.
The Jews can't argue with him because he's referencing the
Right.
prophets.
Right. It's the full revelation coming forward. Yeah. I was going to pull that in Acts 15 because that's exactly what James does too. James pulls the Old Testament forward and says you can't argue with this because this is what the prophets have said. But yeah, good point. All right, a couple questions, and then we're done for the day. So I wanted just this introductory paragraph kind of talk about what sort of Paul's introducing the letter, how he's addressing the people. And we saw a couple of themes. But I'm going to ask you this question, which is maybe a little different. Because he talked about revelation, I'm going to ask this question. What are some things that God has revealed to you this last year? Because his revelation continues in our own lives. Oh, I didn't think that would be hard.
Prayer. I've been amazed by the power of
Power of prayer. Specific example, or
I've been praying through the Bible prayers, and it's just taught me so much about that he was faithful then, he's still faithful now.
Yeah.
The same problems were then that are still now. He's got all this.
Yeah.
He's your hope.
Yeah. Yeah. What about someone else? What are things he's revealed to you this year?
I think he's revealed how amazing he is, that things that I thought would happen a certain way still happen, but not in the way that I thought that it would happen. I mean, I've just been amazed by how he might answer a prayer.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think to go with that, when we pray for a miracle, especially in healing, God doesn't always, he answers with a miracle, but it's not always the one that we necessarily thought we wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's where we have to just trust that he knows, he's got it.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty wild year in the political realm. And I think God has glorified himself by some very visible, high visibility miracles. That he's still in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless, I'm not saying that these are affirmation alone, but I find them encouraging.
Yeah.
That I think there's a lot of people still praying for this country that we will be one nation under God,
Mm-hmm.
and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think he has affirmed many people through some of the things we have seen this last year that were just almost beyond belief, really, that he's still in charge. And if we call out to him as
Right.
a nation, he will bless us.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that we've seen miracles this year.
Yeah, and more to come on that, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I don't stake my hopes on that at all,
Yeah.
but it is encouraging.
Yeah. Well, since you talked about encouragement, I'm going to transition to this question. What are some way others have encouraged your walk in recent days? No one's been encouraged in recent days?
Marla, we've encouraged each other.
Many, many.
We've
times.
spent the
And I
weekend.
wrote you a thank you this morning because, and Tim, you are been such a blessing in our lives.
I mean, just over what we've done over the last couple of days,
Yes.
we've been encouraging to each other.
That's how he sort of frames this letter. He's telling the Romans how much he's encouraged by hearing about what they're doing, but he's also coming to give a specific gift of encouragement to them.
That fellowship.
Yeah, well, it's more than that. It's more than just,
That's part of it.
yeah, it's part of it. Yeah, but it's we're all on a journey, and some days are better than others, and some days are darker than others, and crap happens in our lives. It just does. But all of those are opportunities for the body of Christ to come together, and to step up.
Been encouraged by, I've been working with a group that's trying to getting into the schools. It's called the Good News Club. And it's a Christian-based after-school program. Been trying to get into school for 2 years. And this past Thursday, we had our first meeting at school. And one of the boys it's 3 boys right now. We're hoping they'll bring their friends and it won't grow, but that was very encouraging.
Yeah.
Very
That we're
encouraging.
being allowed into schools.
Well, you talked about one boy that seems to be,
Oh, preacher, yeah, I mean, he was amazing.
yeah,
He was the oldest of the 3. We have a kindergartner, whatever, and a 5th grader, but he was awesome.
we just share this story with Lily, our granddaughter. Her and her mom have been going to this church up in Indiana that we went when we were up there. And so Lily's in the daycare of that church for the morning. And I don't know where we were in the car. I don't know where it came up, but she's telling us about the story of Adam and Eve. And she gets it right. She talks about the bad guy and the temptation. And it's like she understands. She understands that at her level, she's understanding something about that. And that's just so encouraging when you see that take hold in a child, where they begin to understand who God is and what it means to be, good and bad is not just to follow a rule. It's, am I with God? Am I following God? Am I walking with God?
Talking about school, I mean, I had been following Charlie Kirk closely for several years, and I was stunned at his assassination.
Yeah.
It hit hard.
Yeah.
God has taken Charlie's desire and exploded it into the colleges and the high schools.
Yeah.
The chapters have exploded, the interest, the desire to seek God, to seek the truth.
Right.
Through his efforts, and God took a terribly painful high price, but it was Charlie's desire. I guarantee you he would have surrendered to it if he had known. I guarantee you he would have taken a bullet if he had known what the results of that, for the glory of God. Unbelievable. It's been amazing.
Yeah. And hopefully that'll be, that will be a continuing
Keep going.
thing. All right, here's one final one. This one ought to hit really close to home. So what opportunities have you pursued to build up someone recently?
There's your school.
There's your school. Yeah.
This little boy saying, when you pray, you have to pray prayers from your heart. I mean, it's just like, just
Okay, I'm gonna,
We came here because Terry's dad was approaching assisted living. And for the last 2 years or so, he has been on his own and we've been there to encourage him.
Mhm.
Well, an interesting parallel started to help correlate for me more the purpose of God for why are we here
yeah.
in Florida, of all places,
Mhm.
from Seattle, about as far away as you can get. As I spoke with my mom to try and encourage her about my dad's passing about 3 weeks ago, we were experiencing almost the same exact sequence of events with Terry's dad.
Mhm.
And it just sort of clicked with me. Okay, I get it. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we're gonna,
I'm separated from my mom at the worst time.
yeah,
It's like I did not understand that
yeah.
until that conversation.
Let's pop right there and